June 5th, 1944, 21:30 hours, Southwick House, Portsmouth, England. General Dwight Eisenhower sits alone in a small room, staring at a piece of paper. He's holding a pen. The paper is blank, except for a date at the top, June 5th. Outside, 156,000 men are boarding ships and aircraft. 5,000 vessels are preparing to cross the English Channel. 11,000 planes are being fueled and armed. The largest invasion force in human history is about to launch, and Eisenhower is writing a failure speech. "Our landings have failed," he writes. "The troops, the air, and the Navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone." He folds the paper, puts it in his pocket. Then he walks outside to watch his army disappear into the darkness. In 24 hours, 4,414 Allied soldiers will be dead. Another 9,000 will be wounded or missing. The invasion will succeed, but the cost will be so high that Eisenhower will carry that failure speech in his pocket for the rest of his life, just to remember how close it came to being read on international radio. This is the story of D-Day. Not the sanitized version, not the Hollywood version, the real version, where everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and 156,000 men somehow turned complete chaos into the most important military victory of the 20th century. But to understand what happened on June 6th, we need to go back 4 years, back to when Hitler controlled everything from France to Poland, and Britain was alone, waiting for an invasion that never came. France falls in 6 weeks. The British army evacuates from Dunkirk, leaving behind all their equipment. Hitler controls the entire European coastline from Norway to Spain. Britain stands alone. Churchill knows the only way to win is to eventually invade Europe, take back France, push into Germany. But in 1940, Britain barely has enough strength to defend itself. An invasion is impossible. The Americans aren't in the war yet. The Soviets have a non-aggression pact with Hitler. Britain is isolated, outgunned, and facing a German military machine that just conquered an entire continent in less than a year. The idea of invading Europe seems insane. It would require building the largest amphibious force in history, training millions of soldiers, designing new ships, new tanks, new landing craft. It would take years of planning and preparation. But Churchill starts planning anyway, because he knows that eventually, somehow, the Allies will have to return to France. They'll have to punch through Hitler's Atlantic Wall and establish a foothold on the continent. The question isn't if, it's when, and how many men will die trying. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, America enters the war. Suddenly, the impossible becomes possible. American industrial power, American manpower, combined with British intelligence and Soviet pressure from the East. Stalin immediately demands a second front. He wants the Western Allies to invade Europe and relieve pressure on the Eastern Front. Churchill and Roosevelt promise it will happen. But where and when? The Germans know an invasion is coming. They just don't know where. The entire European coast is vulnerable. Norway, Denmark, Holland, Belgium, France. Any beach could be the landing site. Hitler assigns Field Marshal Erwin Rommel to defend the Atlantic Wall. Rommel inspects the defenses and realizes they're inadequate. He orders massive reinforcements, millions of mines, thousands of obstacles, concrete bunkers, artillery positions, machine gun nests. Rommel's plan is simple. Stop the invasion at the beach. Don't let the Allies establish a foothold. Destroy them in the surf before they can dig in. The first 24 hours will determine everything. He's right. The Allies know they have one chance. If the invasion fails, it will take years to rebuild the forces for another attempt. Hitler will have time to develop new weapons, the V-2 rockets, the jet fighters, maybe even atomic weapons. Everything depends on June 6th, 1944. The Allies choose Normandy, not the closest point to England, not the most obvious target. The Germans expect an invasion at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest part of the Channel. So the Allies choose beaches 150 miles west. 5 beaches. Code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. American forces will hit Utah and Omaha. British and Canadian forces will assault Gold, Juno, and Sword. The plan calls for airborne troops to drop behind enemy lines at midnight, secure key bridges and roads, prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches. Then, at dawn, the largest amphibious assault in history will hit the beaches with overwhelming force. Simple plan, except nothing about D-Day will be simple. The invasion is scheduled for June 5th. Then the weather turns. Storms in the Channel, high winds, heavy seas. The landing craft can't operate in these conditions. Eisenhower delays 24 hours. June 6th is the last possible date. After that, the tides won't be right for another 2 weeks. 2 weeks of keeping 156,000 men secret on ships in English ports. 2 weeks of risking German intelligence discovering the invasion fleet. 2 weeks of giving Rommel more time to strengthen his defenses. Eisenhower's chief meteorologist, Group Captain James Stagg, reports a brief window. The weather will improve for maybe 36 hours starting June 6th. It's not ideal, it's barely acceptable, but it's the only chance. At 04:15 hours on June 5th, Eisenhower makes the decision. Okay, we'll go. 156,000 men, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, all committed to an invasion that depends on a 36-hour weather window predicted by one meteorologist. If Stagg is wrong, thousands will drown in the Channel before they ever see the beaches. June 5th, 2300 hours. Airfields across southern England. 13,000 American paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions are boarding C-47 transport planes. Their mission: drop behind Utah Beach, secure causeways and bridges, prevent German reinforcements from reaching the landing zones. These men have trained for 2 years. They know the plan. They know their objectives. What they don't know is that in 6 hours, 70% of them will be scattered across 25 miles of German-occupied France with no idea where they are. Private John Steele, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, boards his C-47. He's carrying 120 pounds of equipment: rifle, ammunition, grenades, rations, medical supplies. He can barely move. The plane takes off at 23:30 hours. It's part of a formation of 822 C-47s carrying the entire 82nd and 101st Airborne. They fly in tight formation across the Channel. No lights, radio silence, navigation by dead reckoning. The plan calls for the paratroopers to drop at 01:30 hours, 5 hours before the beach landings. This will give them time to organize, capture their objectives, and be in position when the invasion begins. But at 00:45 hours, the formations hit cloud banks over Normandy. The tight formations break apart. Pilots lose sight of each other. German anti-aircraft fire starts coming up. Planes take evasive action. Some pilots speed up, some slow down, some climb, some dive. By 01:30 hours, when the paratroopers start jumping, the formations are scattered across 25 miles of Norman countryside. Men are dropping into the wrong zones, into flooded fields, into towns occupied by German garrisons, into trees, into rivers. Private Steele jumps at 01:40 hours. His plane is taking heavy fire. 2 men in his stick are killed by flak before they even exit the aircraft. Steele jumps. His chute opens. He looks down. He's descending directly onto the town square of Sainte-Mère-Église. The town is occupied by Germans. There's a building on fire. German soldiers are in the streets. They're looking up. They're shooting. Steele's parachute catches on the church steeple. He's hanging 50 feet above the town square. Germans are shooting at him. He can't cut himself free without falling to his death. He can't fight back. He can't do anything. So he plays dead, hangs motionless from the church steeple while Germans shoot his friends in the air and on the ground. He hangs there for 2 hours before Germans finally cut him down and take him prisoner. He'll escape 3 days later. But right now, in the first minutes of D-Day, he's hanging from a church steeple watching the invasion fall apart before it even begins. Across Normandy, the airborne drop is chaos. Lieutenant Richard Winters of Easy Company, 506 PIR, lands in a field. He has no idea where he is. He can hear gunfire in every direction. He activates his cricket clicker, the device paratroopers use to identify each other in the dark. He hears a response, moves toward it, finds 2 men from his unit, then 3 more, then 5. By 0300 hours, Winters has assembled 15 men. He's supposed to have 140. They're lost. They have no radio contact. They don't know where they are or where their objectives are, but they can hear machine gun fire from the direction of the beach, so they start moving toward the sound of guns. At 0400 hours, Winters' group stumbles onto a German position. 4 105mm artillery guns firing on Utah Beach. The guns are protected by 50 German infantry in trenches. Winters has 15 men. The smart move is to bypass the position and continue toward their assigned objectives. But those guns are killing Americans on Utah Beach. Winters makes a decision. They're attacking. The assault on Brecourt Manor becomes one of the most famous small-unit actions of D-Day. 15 paratroopers assault 50 Germans in a fortified position. The fight lasts 2 hours. Winters' men destroy all 4 guns using grenades and close-range rifle fire. American casualties, 4 wounded, 0 killed. German casualties, 15 dead, 12 wounded, 22 captured. But here's what matters. Those 4 artillery guns were firing on Utah Beach. Every shell was landing in the middle of the 4th Infantry Division as they came ashore. Winters' assault silenced the guns at 0600 hours, just as the beach landings began. How many American lives did 15 paratroopers save by attacking when they should have retreated? Impossible to calculate. But the 4th Infantry Division suffered only 197 casualties at Utah Beach, the lightest casualties of any D-Day beach. 15 men, 4 artillery pieces, possibly hundreds of lives saved. That's the story of the airborne drop. 13,000 men scattered across Normandy, 70% landing in the wrong place, 20% injured or killed in the drop. But the survivors fought anyway, captured bridges, ambushed German reinforcements, created so much chaos that the Germans couldn't organize effective resistance. By 0600 hours, when the beach landings began, the German commanders had no idea what was happening. They knew paratroopers had dropped. But where? How many? What were their objectives? The confusion and chaos created by 13,000 scattered paratroopers proved more effective than a perfectly executed drop would have been. Now let's go to the beaches, because while Winters is fighting at Brecourt Manor, 156,000 men are crossing the English Channel in the largest amphibious assault in human history. June 6th, 0300 hours. The English Channel. 5,000 ships are crossing from England to France. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, transport ships, landing craft, minesweepers. The armada stretches for 50 miles. On the transport ships, soldiers are trying to sleep. Most can't. Some are writing letters, some are praying, some are vomiting. The channel is rough. Waves are 4 to 6 feet. The landing craft are rolling and pitching. Men who have never been seasick are vomiting. Private Robert Sales, 116th Infantry Regiment, is on a transport ship heading for Omaha Beach. He's 19 years old, from Virginia. He enlisted right after Pearl Harbor, trained for 2 years. This is his first combat. At 0500 hours, Sales and his company climb down cargo nets into landing craft. The landing craft, vehicle, personnel, LCVP, holds 36 men. Sales is near the front. That means he'll be one of the first out when the ramp drops. The LCVP pulls away from the transport at 0520 hours. It's still dark. The shore is 12 miles away. The landing craft will take 90 minutes to reach the beach. 90 minutes of rolling in heavy seas. 90 minutes of waiting. 90 minutes of watching the guy next to you vomit. At 0550 hours, the naval bombardment begins. Battleships and cruisers open fire on the German positions. The sound is overwhelming. Shells the size of cars fly overhead. The explosions on shore light up the pre-dawn darkness. The plan calls for 40 minutes of naval bombardment, enough to destroy the German bunkers and artillery positions, enough to suppress enemy fire when the landing craft hit the beach. But the battleships are firing from 6 miles offshore. At that range, in rough seas, accuracy is terrible. Most shells are landing inland, missing the beach defenses entirely. The German bunkers survive intact. At 0630 hours, B-17 and B-24 bombers arrive. 1,300 heavy bombers carrying 13,000 bombs. The plan? Carpet bomb the beach defenses immediately before the landings. Destroy anything the naval bombardment missed. But visibility is poor. Cloud cover. Smoke from the naval bombardment. The bomber crews can't see their targets. Afraid of hitting the landing craft approaching the beach, they delay their bomb release by a few seconds. Those few seconds mean the bombs land inland. 13,000 bombs. Not one hits the beach defenses. The German bunkers remain intact. At 0630 hours, the first wave of landing craft is 1,000 yards from shore. The men can see the beach now. They can see the obstacles, steel hedgehogs, wooden ramps, Belgian gates, mines attached to posts. The entire beach is covered with obstacles designed to rip landing craft apart. The plan called for specialized demolition teams to clear 16 gaps through the obstacles in the first 30 minutes. Each gap would be 50 yards wide, marked with buoys. The following waves would use these gaps to reach the beach safely. But the demolition teams are in the first wave. They're landing at the same time as the assault infantry, under the same fire, with the same chaos. At 0631 hours, the ramps drop. Company A, 116th Infantry Regiment, hits Omaha Beach. The company has 200 men. They land directly in front of a German strongpoint. Machine gun fire opens up immediately. The men coming off the landing craft are cut down in the water. Private Sales is in the third rank. The ramp drops. The men in front of him are hit before they reach the beach. Sales jumps into shoulder-deep water. The tide is higher than expected. Men weighted down with equipment are drowning. He wades toward shore. Bullets hit the water around him. Men are screaming. The soldier next to him is hit and goes under. Sales reaches the beach. There's no cover, just 300 yards of open sand between the water and the seawall. He runs. German machine guns are firing from concrete bunkers. Artillery is landing in the surf. Mortar rounds are exploding on the beach. Sales makes it to the seawall. Looks back. The beach is covered with dead and wounded. Company A lands at 0631 hours with 200 men. By 0700 hours, 96 are dead or wounded. The company commander is dead. All the officers are dead or wounded. The senior surviving NCO is a staff sergeant who's been in the Army for 6 months. This is Omaha Beach. This is the killing ground. Let's talk about why Omaha was so much worse than the other beaches, because while Omaha is turning into a slaughter, Utah Beach to the west is relatively quiet, and Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches to the east are seeing moderate casualties but steady progress. Omaha is different for three reasons. First, the terrain. Omaha Beach is a natural killing ground, a curved beach 6,000 yards long, high bluffs on three sides, 5 narrow valleys leading inland. The Germans fortified every approach. If you designed a beach specifically to murder amphibious invaders, you'd design Omaha. Second, the defenders. Most French beaches were defended by second-rate German units, old men, conscripted foreigners, troops with poor training and low morale. But Omaha was defended by the 352nd Infantry Division, full strength, combat veterans from the Eastern Front, well-trained, well-equipped, motivated. The Allied intelligence missed this. They thought Omaha was defended by a single regiment of low-quality troops. Instead, an entire division was waiting in fortified positions. Third, the preparatory bombardment failed. At Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword, the naval guns and bombers hit their targets. They destroyed German positions and suppressed defensive fire. At Omaha, the naval bombardment was ineffective and the aerial bombardment landed inland. The German bunkers were untouched. So at 0631 hours, when the first wave hit Omaha Beach, they were landing against a full-strength German division in intact fortifications on terrain designed for defense. The result was predictable and catastrophic. By 0700 hours, 30 minutes after the first landing, Omaha Beach is failing. 8 of the first 10 landing craft are destroyed or disabled. 300 men are casualties. The demolition teams can't clear the obstacles because they're pinned down by machine gun fire. The beach is clogged with burning vehicles and dead soldiers. The second wave lands at 0700 hours. They hit the same obstacles, the same fire. More casualties. Landing craft are piling up at the waterline. Some are burning, some are sinking. The beach is complete chaos. Brigadier General Norman Cota, Assistant Division Commander of the 29th Infantry Division, lands at 0730 hours. He's 51 years old, too old to be landing in the first wave, but he's here anyway because his men are dying. Cota walks up the beach under fire. He finds a group of soldiers pinned down behind the seawall. They're terrified, paralyzed, watching their friends die, waiting for orders that aren't coming because all their officers are dead. Cota asks them a question. "What outfit is this?" "5th Rangers, sir." Cota responds, "Well, goddammit, if you're Rangers, get up and lead the way." The Rangers get up. They cross the seawall, start moving toward the bluffs. Other soldiers see them and follow. Slowly, in small groups, the assault starts to move forward. This is how Omaha Beach was saved. Not by the plan, not by superior firepower, not by overwhelming force, by small groups of men deciding to move forward when staying put meant death. Colonel George Taylor, commander of the 16th Infantry Regiment, lands at 0800 hours. He finds his men pinned down, gives them the most famous order of D-Day. 2 kinds of people are staying on this beach, the dead and those who are going to die. Now let's get the hell out of here. By 0900 hours, small groups are fighting their way off the beach. They're using flamethrowers to clear bunkers, Bangalore torpedoes to blow wire obstacles, demolition charges to destroy pillboxes. It's slow, it's costly, but it's progress. The Germans are running low on ammunition. They've been firing continuously for 90 minutes. Some positions are down to their last few hundred rounds. Others have used all their grenades. The defenders are exhausted, overwhelmed, starting to crack. At 1000 hours, elements of the 116th Infantry reach the top of the bluffs. They're not at their assigned objectives. They're nowhere near where they're supposed to be. But they're off the beach. They're inland. And once American troops are inland, the German defense starts to collapse. By 1200 hours, noon, 6 hours after the first landing, American forces control the high ground above Omaha Beach. The beachhead is 1 mile deep at its farthest point. 1,500 yards on average. Casualties, 2,400 dead and wounded, 2,400 casualties on one beach in 6 hours. But Omaha holds. The Germans throw in their reserves but can't push the Americans back into the sea. By nightfall, 34,000 American troops are ashore at Omaha. The beachhead is secure. While Omaha was turning into a bloodbath, let's look at what was happening on the other beaches. Because D-Day wasn't just Omaha. It was 5 beaches, 5 separate assaults happening simultaneously. Utah Beach, 0630 hours. The 4th Infantry Division lands 2,000 yards south of their intended landing zone. Strong currents pushed the landing craft off course. This turns out to be the luckiest mistake of D-Day. The Germans fortified the original landing zone heavily. The area where the 4th Division actually lands is lightly defended. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., Assistant Division Commander, is in the first wave. He's 56 years old. He has a heart condition. He walks with a cane from arthritis. He's also the only general officer to land with the first wave on D-Day. Roosevelt walks up the beach under fire, determines they're in the wrong location, makes a decision. We'll start the war from right here. Utah Beach is the most successful of the 5 D-Day beaches. Casualties, 197 men out of 23,000. The 4th Division links up with the 101st Airborne by nightfall. By the end of D-Day, Utah Beach has landed 20,000 troops and 1,700 vehicles. Theodore Roosevelt, Jr. will die of a heart attack 1 month later. But on June 6, 1944, a 56-year-old general with a cane and a bad heart leads the assault that secures the westernmost Allied beachhead, Gold Beach. 0730 hours. British forces. The 50th Northumbrian Division lands an hour after the Americans because the tide is different on the eastern beaches. The delay means better visibility. The naval bombardment is more effective. The specialized British armor, Churchill tanks, flail tanks, bridge-laying tanks, clear obstacles and provide fire support. Gold Beach casualties, 400 dead and wounded. By nightfall, the British have advanced 6 miles inland and linked up with Canadian forces from Juno Beach. Juno Beach, 0745 hours. Canadian forces. The 3rd Canadian Division hits heavy resistance. Rough seas delayed their landing. They arrive at mid-tide when the beach obstacles are partially submerged. Landing craft hit obstacles and sink. The first wave takes 50% casualties in some companies, but the Canadians fight their way inland. By 1100 hours, they've captured the town of Courseulles. By nightfall, they've advanced 7 miles inland, farther than any other Allied unit on D-Day. Juno Beach casualties, 961 Canadians killed or wounded. Sword Beach, 0730 hours. British forces. The 3rd British Division lands with support from French commandos and British commandos under Lord Lovat. Lovat's commandos land with bagpiper Bill Millen playing Highland Laddie while walking through machine gun fire. Sword Beach is the easternmost Allied beach, only 9 miles from the city of Caen, a major D-Day objective. The plan calls for British armor to push inland and capture Caen on the first day. They don't make it. German armor from the 21st Panzer Division counterattacks in the afternoon. The British are stopped 3 miles short of Caen. The city won't be captured until July, 5 weeks later. Sword Beach casualties, 630 dead and wounded. By 2400 hours, midnight, June 6th ends. The largest amphibious invasion in history is complete. 5 beaches, 156,000 troops landed, 24,000 airborne troops dropped. The Atlantic Wall is breached. But let's talk about the cost, because success came at a terrible price. American casualties, 2,501 dead. British casualties, 1,449 dead. Canadian casualties, 391 dead. Other Allied nations, 73 dead. Total, 4,414 confirmed dead. Another 5,000 wounded, another 1,000 missing. Some of the missing washed out to sea and were never found. Some were captured. Some were buried in collapsed bunkers or burned beyond recognition. 4,414 dead in 24 hours. To put that in perspective, that's more Americans killed on D-Day than were killed during the entire Iraq War. More British dead than died during the entire Falklands War. More Canadians than died in Afghanistan over 12 years. All in one day, on 6 miles of French beaches. But here's what those 4,414 deaths accomplished. By midnight, June 6th, 156,000 Allied troops are ashore in France. The Atlantic Wall is broken. Hitler's fortress Europe has been breached. The liberation of Western Europe has begun. Within a week, the Allies will land 326,000 troops and 54,000 vehicles. Within a month, over 1 million troops. By August, Paris will be liberated. By September, Allied forces will be at the German border. By May 1945, Germany will surrender. All of it starts on June 6, 1944. But the immediate aftermath of D-Day is grim. The beaches are covered with wreckage, destroyed landing craft, burned-out vehicles, bodies, wounded men waiting for evacuation. The smell of explosives and death hangs over the shoreline. Medics work through the night treating casualties. Graves registration teams begin the terrible task of identifying the dead. Engineers clear obstacles and build supply dumps. The invasion continues. More waves landing, more supplies coming ashore, more troops pushing inland. The German response is confused and slow. Hitler is convinced D-Day is a diversion. He believes the real invasion will come at Pas-de-Calais. He refuses to release armored reserves stationed near Paris. By the time German High Command realizes Normandy is the main invasion, it's too late. The Allies have established a foothold. Field Marshal Rommel is away from Normandy on June 6th. He's in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday. When he hears about the invasion, he races back to France. But the crucial first hours are lost. The hours when German armor might have pushed the Allies back into the sea. By June 7th, the second day, the beachheads are consolidated. American forces at Utah and Omaha link up. British and Canadian forces connect their beaches. The 5 separate beachheads become one continuous front. The lodgment is secure, but the fighting is far from over. The Battle of Normandy will last until August. 11 weeks of brutal combat. The bocage country, the hedgerows, will slow the Allied advance to a crawl. American casualties in Normandy will eventually reach 29,000 dead and 106,000 wounded. But D-Day, June 6, 1944, remains the critical day. The day the Allies returned to France. The day Hitler's Atlantic Wall was broken. The day 156,000 men crossed the English Channel and established the foothold that would lead to the liberation of Europe. Eisenhower never had to read his failure speech, but he kept it in his pocket for years, a reminder of how close D-Day came to disaster, how many things went wrong, how the success depended on junior officers and NCOs making split-second decisions when the plan fell apart. The real story of D-Day isn't about perfect planning or overwhelming force. It's about chaos, confusion, and courage. It's about 19-year-old privates wading through surf under machine gun fire. It's about paratroopers scattered across Normandy fighting battles they weren't supposed to fight. It's about generals walking beaches under fire when they should have been in command posts. It's about 4,414 men who died in 24 hours so that Europe could be free. Today, the Normandy American Cemetery overlooks Omaha Beach. 9,387 white crosses and stars of David, perfectly aligned, stretching across 172 acres of French soil given in perpetuity by France to the United States. Not all the D-Day dead are buried there. Some were returned to the United States. Some are buried in other military cemeteries across Europe. Some were never found. But Normandy American Cemetery holds the largest concentration of D-Day casualties. Every cross represents a story, a family, a future that ended on June 6, 1944. Private Robert Sales, who we followed onto Omaha Beach, survived. He fought through Normandy, through France, through Germany. He returned home to Virginia in 1945, married, had 3 children, died in 1998 at age 73. He never talked about D-Day. When his children asked about the war, he changed the subject. That's common among D-Day survivors. Many never spoke about it. The memories were too painful, the cost too high, the friends they lost too numerous. Lieutenant Richard Winters, who destroyed the artillery at Brecourt Manor, survived the war, returned to Pennsylvania, lived a quiet life. When Stephen Ambrose wrote about him in Band of Brothers, Winters was reluctant to be portrayed as a hero. He said the real heroes were the ones who didn't come home. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., who landed with the first wave at Utah Beach, is buried at Normandy American Cemetery, Plot E, Row 10, Grave 21, next to his brother Quentin, who was killed in World War I. 2 brothers, 2 wars, both buried in France. General Norman Cota, who rallied the Rangers at Omaha Beach, survived the war, retired as a major general. When asked about D-Day, he said the bravery wasn't his. It belonged to the 19-year-old privates who got up off that beach when every instinct told them to stay down. The DD tanks, duplex-drive amphibious Shermans, were supposed to provide fire support for the beach landings. At Omaha, 29 were launched from ships 6,000 yards offshore. 27 sank in the rough seas. 135 crew members drowned before they ever saw the beach. Only 2 tanks made it to shore. The failure of the DD tanks meant the first waves at Omaha had no armor support, no way to suppress the German bunkers. It's one reason Omaha casualties were so high. The demolition teams at Omaha were supposed to clear 16 gaps through the beach obstacles. They cleared 6, not because they weren't brave or skilled, but because half the team members were casualties in the first 15 minutes. The survivors worked under continuous fire for 4 hours. 16 teams suffered 41% casualties, but those 6 gaps saved thousands of lives. The naval gunfire support was critical. Destroyers came within 800 yards of shore, risking running aground, to fire point-blank at German bunkers. Several destroyers were hit by German artillery, but their fire suppression allowed troops to get off the beaches. The Air Force dropped 13,000 bombs on D-Day, flew 14,000 sorties, lost 127 aircraft. The strategic bombing campaign before D-Day destroyed French rail networks and bridges, preventing German reinforcements from reaching Normandy quickly. This was crucial. If German armor had reached the beaches on June 6th in strength, D-Day might have failed. The intelligence war before D-Day was equally important. Operation Fortitude convinced Hitler that the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. Fake radio traffic, dummy tanks and landing craft in Dover, double agents feeding false information. The deception was so successful that Hitler kept 15 divisions near Calais for weeks after D-Day, waiting for an invasion that never came. The human cost of D-Day extends beyond the 4,414 dead. Thousands more were wounded and crippled for life, lost limbs, lost sight, suffered psychological trauma. Many D-Day veterans struggled with what we now call PTSD for decades after the war. But they accomplished something unprecedented, the largest amphibious invasion in history, against a fortified coastline defended by a first-rate military. in rough weather, with incomplete intelligence, and despite everything going wrong, they succeeded. D-Day proved that free societies could organize, train, and deploy military forces capable of defeating fascist totalitarianism. That democracy wasn't weak, that free men fighting for a just cause could overcome any obstacle. The legacy of D-Day is complicated. Yes, it began the liberation of Europe. Yes, it was necessary. Yes, it led to the defeat of Nazi Germany. But it also killed 4,414 young men in 24 hours, destroyed families, created widows and orphans. Was it worth it? Ask the people of occupied Europe. Ask the survivors of concentration camps. Ask the millions who would have died if Nazi Germany had continued to rule Europe. The men who died on D-Day didn't die for abstractions. They died for the guy next to them, for their squad, for their company. They died because someone had to go first. Someone had to cross that beach. Someone had to break the Atlantic Wall. Eisenhower understood this. That's why he wrote the failure speech, because he knew that if D-Day failed, it wouldn't be the fault of those men. They would do everything bravery and devotion to duty could do. If D-Day failed, the fault would be his. But D-Day didn't fail. It succeeded, despite the chaos, despite the mistakes, despite everything going wrong, because 156,000 men crossed the channel and fought their way onto those beaches, because 13,000 paratroopers jumped into the darkness, because junior officers and NCOS made decisions when their commanders were dead, because 19-year-old privates did things they never thought they could do. June 6, 1944, wasn't perfect. It was messy, brutal, chaotic. Men drowned, men burned, men died screaming on beaches thousands of miles from home. But by midnight, the Atlantic Wall was broken. The liberation of Europe had begun, and 4,414 men had paid the ultimate price to make it happen. Every year on June 6th, ceremonies are held at Normandy American Cemetery. Veterans return, fewer each year. They stand on the bluffs above Omaha Beach and remember friends who never left. They walk among the white crosses. They cry. They salute. They remember. In 1984, on the 40th anniversary, President Ronald Reagan gave a speech at Pointe du Hoc, where Rangers scaled 100-foot cliffs under fire. He pointed to the veterans in the audience. These are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. These are the heroes who helped end a war. Many of those veterans shook their heads. They didn't feel like heroes. They felt like survivors. The real heroes, they said, were the ones who didn't come home. In 2004, on the 60th anniversary, thousands of veterans returned to Normandy. They were in their 80s. Many needed wheelchairs. Some needed oxygen. But they came back to remember, to honor the friends they lost, to stand once more on the beaches where they'd fought 60 years before. One veteran stood at the water's edge at Omaha Beach. He was 82 years old. He'd landed in the first wave with Company A, 116th Infantry. He'd watched his friends die in the surf. He'd made it to the seawall. He'd fought his way inland. A reporter asked him why he came back. He looked at the beach, at the sand where so many had died. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "I left part of myself here. I needed to come back and find it." That's what D-Day means to the men who were there. It's not just history. It's not just strategy and statistics. It's the day they lost their innocence. The day they saw the worst humanity could do. The day they discovered what they were capable of. For the rest of us, D-Day is a reminder that freedom isn't free, that democracy requires sacrifice, that sometimes, in the face of absolute evil, good men must do terrible things. The 4,414 who died on D-Day didn't die for nothing. They died so Europe could be free, so fascism could be defeated, so their children could grow up in a world without Nazi death camps and totalitarian nightmares. That's their legacy. Not just the military victory, not just the liberation of Europe, but the principle that some things are worth dying for, that freedom matters, that standing against tyranny requires courage. 80 years later, D-Day remains the largest amphibious invasion in history. No military operation before or since has matched its scale. 156,000 troops, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft, all committed to a single day, a single objective: break the Atlantic Wall and establish a foothold in Europe. They succeeded. But success came at a cost: 4,414 dead, 9,000 wounded, thousands more psychologically scarred for life. Was it worth it? Ask yourself, what would the world look like if D-Day had failed? If Hitler had won World War II? If Nazi Germany had continued to rule Europe? The men who died on D-Day saved the world. Not by themselves, not alone, but their sacrifice, their courage, their willingness to face death on those beaches made everything else possible. The breakout from Normandy, the liberation of Paris, the drive into Germany, the end of the Holocaust, the defeat of fascism, all of it traces back to June 6th, 1944. To the day 156,000 men crossed the English Channel and refused to fail. Eisenhower's failure speech was never read, but he kept it in his pocket, a reminder that D-Day could have failed, that it almost did fail. That success depended on 1,000 small decisions made by junior officers and enlisted men when everything went wrong. That's the real lesson of D-Day. Not that great generals win wars, but that wars are won by ordinary people doing extraordinary things, by privates who advance when they should retreat, by sergeants who lead when their officers are dead, by men who refuse to quit even when quitting seems like the only rational choice. Curtis Cullen welded German trash to American tanks and solved the bocage problem. 15 paratroopers assaulted 50 Germans and silenced artillery guns. A 5-6-year-old general with a cane led the assault at Omaha Beach. Junior officers rallied broken units at Omaha Beach. None of these men were extraordinary before D-Day. They became extraordinary because the situation demanded it, because their friends were dying, because someone had to do something. That's what D-Day teaches us: that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage, that freedom requires sacrifice, that democracy must be defended by those willing to fight for it. June 6th, 1944. 4,414 deaths in 24 hours. The bloodiest day of the liberation of Europe. The day the Atlantic Wall was broken. The day the tide of World War II turned irreversibly toward Allied victory. Eisenhower called them the champions who helped free a continent. Reagan called them the heroes who helped end a war. The veterans called themselves survivors. But history calls them something else: the men who saved the world. And it started on 5 beaches in Normandy, with 156,000 men crossing the Channel, with 13,000 paratroopers jumping into darkness, with 4,414 men who never came home. We remember them. We honor them. We owe them everything. That's what happened on D-Day. Not the sanitized version, not the Hollywood version, the real version, where everything went wrong, and men died, and somehow, against impossible odds, freedom won. 4,414 deaths in 24 hours. Each one a person, each one a future that ended, each one a price paid for the world we live in today. Never forget what they did. Never forget what they sacrificed. Never forget that freedom isn't free. D-Day, June 6th, 1944. The day 156,000 men changed the world. The day 4,414 men gave everything so we could be free.